Well, today the title is Meet Me in Galilee. And what I was going to have Christopher smell, but I'll have him smell later, is this is called The Scent of Galilee. I bought that in Israel when I was there. It's really pretty. And you know, the smell, it's funny because it smells like Galilee. Not like nasty water, but like the flowers and the things. We were lucky because when we were there, everything was in bloom still. It hadn't died yet. And so it wasn't good on the allergies, but the fragrances were wonderful. And that's kind of what it smells like. And when I took the lid off, I hadn't actually, when I bought it, I hadn't smelled it for, well, it's been quite a few weeks now. And I opened it up, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing, the flood of the memories. It just brought you right back to where you were at. Thought about that today. It's like I could have gone about any direction with the sermon. And I thought, no, it was Meet Me in Galilee. If you look at on a map, the Sea of Galilee is so that on the east side, or the west side, I gotta look at the map this way, on the west side of it, it kind of comes down to the lake a little easier. You don't have quite the hills as you do on the east side of it. It's very hilly and not nearly populated, not near, in fact, it's pretty barren on most of the side that we saw because of the turning. And so the spot where they had taken us to, well, there's a church there, of course, but that is supposed to be the spot where Jesus met the disciples the first time when they were casting their net. And he came to the same spot the second time when they were out casting their net. And that was really cool to just be there. Just knowing that all that happened in that spot. As I read the scriptures for today, I couldn't help but hear the crackle of the fire as Jesus was cooking the fish. And it says there was 153 fish that they had caught in that net. But the nets weren't breaking. One may say 153 fish if we're thinking little ones, but no, those fish get to be really big. I thought about the disciples a lot. We're all human, aren't we? How many times has God told you to do something and you jumped up and ran and did it immediately? Or are you more like them where they just didn't do it? Or are you more like Gideon who said, well, I want to, but give me a sign. And then God gave him a sign with the fleece, and then he goes, well, that was pretty convincing, but now do the opposite. I need another sign. I need another assurance. You know, the nice thing is throughout all the scriptures, we're given example after example of that people's reaction to God's command are different, and that God still honors most of those. God went ahead and he put water on the fleece, and then he made the fleece dry. With the disciples, they didn't do what he asked, but instead of just standing in Galilee waiting to see how long it would be before somebody showed up, he came to them. After he's met them, though, they decide, okay, they've been in Jerusalem long enough. They go back to Galilee. They go back to doing what it is they normally do. What did they do before Jesus ever met them? They were fishermen, right? And they were out on the seas. That was what was comfortable. That's what they knew. Their whole life was kind of rocked upside down now. They'd had 3 years where they had spent with Jesus every day, going and doing and listening to the teachings of him, and now all of a sudden, he's gone. I mean, he arose and he came back and he saw them a couple times, but for the most part, their whole life is different. He's not with them every day. He's not talking to them every day. And so they decide, okay, they go back to doing what was familiar, what was comfortable. They go back to their old ways of life. And it's Peter who says, as they're kind of ambling around the Sea of Galilee, Peter says, I'm going fishing. And the other ones say, well, we're going with you. Those fishing boats are not that big. I put a couple pictures on the front of your bulletin of the Sea of Galilee, and the one at the bottom is us right there at that spot on the shore, where they probably would have been. But the fishing boats that they had were not as big as the one that you see up top. They were much smaller than that. So if you did get a great big catch, if you notice it said that when they did catch the fish, they left it in the water and they were dragging it behind. Because if they tried to put it into the boat, the boat probably would have sunk and the boat wouldn't have been big enough for all of them and the fish as well. Don't you love what it says about Peter, though? Jesus was on the side. He's doing it. He's into his job. He's trying to get fish. They've been out all night long. They've caught nothing. And Jesus says, "Friends, do you have any fish? Have you caught anything?" Say, "No." And he says, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat." And immediately, they didn't even have to throw it in the water. It says, the one whom Jesus loved, we know that's John, who's writing the book. He says, "It's Jesus!" He knew immediately. But when he said it, then Peter realized that it was Jesus. And what does Peter do? He's a man of action, right? John's more a man of words, but Peter's a man of action. It says he grabs his clothes because he had them off while he was fishing, and he jumps into the water. So they're about 100 yards. That's about 300 feet. And he starts swimming to meet Jesus. He is so excited. Now they've thrown the boat. But the funny thing is, so he throws it in. They cast the net, and it says they have so many fish. They still did what Jesus commanded, right? And they're dragging in this 153 fish. Now when they get there, it didn't say that Jesus was waiting for him to bring the fish. It said he already had fish and bread on the stove, right? On the fire. It was cooked. It was waiting for him. But what does Jesus say next? He says, "Bring some of the fish that you caught." See, he wasn't just doing it for them. He says, "Bring it in. Bring it in. I want to use what you have." And he's preparing them. This is the big pivotal moment when he's going to switch from, "I've been there with you every day, and I've helped you along the way, and I've provided for you. Now you are going to be sent out soon. Now it's going to be up to you to take that mantle position," which is a pretty big mantle. Have you ever thought about that in your life? Sometimes when we are baby Christians and we just come to know God, God is just right there with every step of the way, it seems like, and He's just helping us with everything and helping us with the decisions. And then as we start to grow up and we start to mature in our faith, sometimes it can feel like those weeks in between where we haven't seen or felt Jesus. We've all been there. We've all gone through that. But are you being obedient even though you don't see and feel Him? If He says, "Go to Galilee," are you jumping to go to Galilee? Or are you kind of hanging back and waiting, like Brooke said, because just don't feel like it? Or maybe you need more proof. Maybe you need more evidence. Maybe you need just a swift kick to get going. We fall into all different categories depending on what the situation is, and it'll be that way multiple times throughout our lives. I like this story, mostly because even when they didn't do what Jesus said, He didn't leave them there. He did come and meet them. But ultimately, they did what He said, and what did He do? He met them there, didn't He? Just like He said. With 7 of the disciples that were fishing, that got to have that one-on-one time with Jesus. Now think of that. There was 11. There was 4 that didn't make the trip. There was 4 that weren't out fishing, that missed it. I know on our trip there were some things that Maybe we were the bus that was coming in late, or maybe we got to do some stuff ahead of time, so then we were doing it a little different times. I know there was the tunnel that we got to do during the morning, so we got to go through the whole thing under Jerusalem, and at night, you couldn't go all the way through it because it came up on the Muslim quarter, so they only got to go halfway. I felt really bad because they missed it. There are many times in our lives where things happen and maybe we feel like we've missed it. But Jesus doesn't leave us there again. He continues to meet with them for those 40 days before the ascension. And he doesn't just meet with the 11. It says all those people who'd been traveling with him. There was like 300 plus that had been with Jesus pretty much this whole time. And they all get the chance to see Jesus. They all get the chance to listen to him again, to learn from him, to be encouraged because they're about ready to be sent out on their own. I know the next part of the story that we'll probably look at next week is Jesus' interaction with Peter. See, Peter kind of missed it too. He goofed up a little bit. When Jesus said, he says, oh, I will never deny you. And Jesus says, you're going to deny me. Oh, no, I would even die for you. You know, I always tell people that my mouth is a size 10. I don't have any problem putting my foot in my mouth a lot of times. That's why I like Peter, because he did the same, boldly, swiftly. But again, Jesus doesn't just leave him there, thinking of that, replaying those thoughts in his mind. He comes back to him. He gives him grace and he gives him redemption. He does that with each and every one. He did that with Thomas. Thomas wasn't there. He just missed it. And Jesus comes back for Thomas. If you feel like maybe in your life that God told you to go somewhere, maybe it wasn't Galilee, maybe it was something else in your life, and you fought it. You fought it really hard for years. Maybe you feel like you just missed it. Know that God hasn't left you. He still met you along the way. But he's still waiting for wherever it is he's called you to be. So when you decide in your heart and in your mind that you need to follow his leading, that you need to go where he has called you to go, he will meet you there. And who knows? He may just be sitting with the fire crackling and a few fish on it.